vast expanse of the universe, where stars twinkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet, there existed a planet called Zarathia. It was a world unlike any other, with skies that shimmered in hues of lavender and gold, oceans that glowed faintly under twin moons, and forests filled with crystalline trees that hummed softly when touched by the wind. The inhabitants of this extraordinary realm were no less remarkable. They were tall, elegant beings with skin that shimmered like opals and eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies within them. Among these beings was Princess Leora, the most radiant jewel of Zarathia. Leora was not just beautiful. She was brilliant, fierce, and deeply passionate about her people's survival. But there was one thing everyone knew about her. She despised humans. To her, they represented everything wrong with the galaxy. Their greed, their short-sightedness, their relentless destruction of anything they touched. She had seen it firsthand during diplomatic missions to Earth, where towering cities choked on smog and oceans teemed with plastic waste. Humans, in her mind, were parasites, consuming without giving back, taking without understanding. Her disdain for humanity wasn't merely an opinion. It bordered on obsession. She often spoke out against alliances with Earth, arguing that humanity would eventually consume even the resources of other planets if given half a chance. Her advisors tried to temper her views, reminding her that diplomacy required compromise, but Leora refused to listen. "They are unworthy," she'd say coldly, her voice carrying the weight of finality. And so, her reputation as the alien princess who hated humans spread far and wide. Yet fate has a peculiar sense of humor, doesn't it? For all her hatred, Leora found herself aboard a damaged spacecraft hurtling through space after a failed mission to negotiate peace between two warring factions. Her ship had been ambushed, and now she was stranded light years away from home, drifting aimlessly until help could arrive. It was during this time that she encountered someone who would challenge everything she believed, and perhaps change her forever. The human man introduced himself simply as Evan. He was part of a small crew tasked with repairing satellites orbiting near the edge of Zarathian territory. When his own vessel malfunctioned due to the same cosmic storm that crippled Leora's ship, he managed to dock with hers using what little power remained. At first, neither of them said much. Leora regarded him with thinly veiled contempt, while Evan, sensing her hostility, kept his distance. He wasn't what she expected. Unlike the brash, loud-mouthed humans she'd met before, Evan was quiet and reserved. His face bore the marks of hard work, a faint scar above his eyebrow, calloused hands. But there was kindness in his eyes, something soft and genuine that made her uncomfortable. Still, she refused to let her guard down. "You shouldn't be here," she snapped at him one day as he tinkered with the ship's navigation system. "Your kind always makes things worse." Evan paused, wiping grease-stained fingers on a rag. "Not all of us are bad, you know." "Prove it," she shot back, crossing her arms defiantly. Instead of arguing further, Evan returned to his work, muttering under his breath about stubborn aliens. Despite herself, Leora couldn't help but notice how focused he became when solving problems. There was a calm determination in his movements, a precision that reminded her of Zarathian engineers. Perhaps, she thought grudgingly, some humans weren't entirely useless. As days turned into weeks, their interactions grew more frequent. Evan cooked meals using whatever supplies they salvaged, creating surprisingly tasty dishes despite limited ingredients. One evening, he handed her a plate of steaming stew and said, "Try this. I call it space surprise." Leora raised an eyebrow skeptically but took a bite anyway. To her astonishment, it was delicious. "This isn't terrible," she admitted reluctantly. Evan grinned. "I'll take that as high praise coming from you." Their conversations gradually shifted from terse exchanges to something resembling friendship. Evan told her stories of growing up on a farm under vast open skies, of chasing fireflies on summer nights and dreaming of exploring the stars. Leora listened intently, captivated by his descriptions of Earth's natural beauty, things she'd never bothered to notice before. In return, she shared tales of Zarathia, its glowing oceans and singing forests, painting a picture of a world untouched by industrialization. Despite her growing fondness for Evan, Leora clung to her belief that humans were inherently destructive. Every time he mentioned Earth, she countered with examples of its environmental devastation. Yet, Evan never grew defensive. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully and said, "We're trying to fix it. Not everyone gives up." One night, exhausted from another long day of repairs, Leora accidentally dozed off while sitting beside Evan. Her head lolled onto his shoulder, and for a moment, he froze, unsure what to do. But then, seeing her peaceful expression, he relaxed and allowed himself to enjoy the rare moment of closeness. When she woke up moments later, flustered and embarrassed, she immediately pulled away. "I didn't mean to," she began, her cheeks flushing a deep shade of violet. "It's okay," Evan interrupted gently. "You looked comfortable." For the rest of the evening, neither of them spoke much, though the air between them felt charged with unspoken emotions. Leora tried to convince herself that it was just fatigue, that she hadn't truly rested on a human's shoulder because she trusted him. But deep down, she knew better. Something inside her was changing, whether she liked it or not. Their fragile truce was shattered when trouble came knocking, in the form of pirates. A rogue band of scavengers, drawn by the distress signals emitted by both ships, descended upon them like vultures circling prey. Armed with plasma rifles and cruel intentions, they demanded access to the advanced technology aboard Leora's vessel. Evan and Leora barricaded themselves inside the cockpit, hearts pounding as they listened to the invaders ransack the rest of the ship. "What do we do?" Evan whispered urgently, gripping a wrench like a weapon. "We fight," Leora replied, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Drawing energy from her royal training, she activated a hidden defense mechanism in the ship, causing panels along the walls to emit blinding flashes of light. The sudden burst startled the pirates, buying them precious seconds to act. Together, they devised a plan. Using Evan's knowledge of mechanical systems and Leora's familiarity with alien tech, they rigged traps throughout the ship. One corridor flooded with non-lethal gas, incapacitating several pirates who stumbled blindly into it. Another trap involved releasing a swarm of tiny maintenance drones programmed to attack intruders. The duo worked seamlessly, their combined skills proving far greater than either could achieve alone. At one point, Evan shielded Leora from a hail of laser fire, pushing her behind a console just as sparks flew dangerously close to her head. "Are you insane?" she hissed, though relief washed over her features. "You saved me earlier," he replied with a grin. "Consider it payback." Finally, after what felt like hours of chaos, reinforcements arrived. A Zorathian patrol responding to Leora's earlier distress call. The pirates fled, leaving behind a trail of destruction. As the dust settled, Leora surveyed the damage, her heart heavy with gratitude and guilt. Gratitude for Evan's bravery, guilt for ever doubting him or his species. Back on her repaired ship, Leora found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. Evan stood nearby, watching her silently as she gazed out at the stars. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." Evan shrugged modestly. "Just doing my job." "No," she insisted, turning to face him. "You did more than that. You showed me. Well, you showed me that maybe not all humans are as bad as I thought." He smiled faintly. "Does that mean you don't hate me anymore?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I don't think I ever really did." The admission hung in the air, heavy with implications neither of them dared to explore fully. For now, they simply stood together, two strangers bound by shared experiences and budding feelings neither could quite define. Little did they know, their journey was far from over, and the challenges ahead would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Leora tried to push thoughts of Evan out of her mind, but they lingered like a stubborn shadow. No matter how hard she focused on repairing the ship or planning their next course of action, her mind kept drifting back to him. She replayed moments in her head, the way he had shielded her from danger, his quiet determination when fixing problems, even the warmth of his shoulder as she'd accidentally fallen asleep on it. It infuriated her that this human, this mere human, was occupying so much space in her thoughts. She told herself it was gratitude. That's all it was. He had saved her life multiple times, and she was simply acknowledging his contributions. But deep down, Leora knew better. Her heart raced whenever he entered the room, and her breath hitched when their eyes met. There was no denying it anymore. She was falling for him. The realization terrified her. How could she, Princess Leora of Zorathia, fall for someone she once claimed to despise? Evan, however, seemed blissfully unaware of her internal turmoil, or perhaps he wasn't. One day, while working on recalibrating the ship's engine, he suddenly peeled off his sweat-soaked shirt, revealing toned muscles glistening with perspiration. Leora froze mid-sentence, her jaw dropping slightly before she snapped it shut. "What are you doing?" she demanded. trying to sound annoyed but failing miserably. Getting comfortable, Evan replied casually, flashing her a mischievous grin. Why? Does it bother you? No, she blurted out too quickly, her cheeks flushing violet again. I mean, yes, you're distracting me. Put your shirt back on. But instead of obeying, Evan leaned casually against the wall, flexing his arms exaggeratedly as if testing them for strength. You know, humans aren't just about destruction and chaos, he teased, winking at her. We've got some pretty impressive qualities too. Leora's glare intensified, though it lacked real conviction. You're insufferable, she muttered, turning away to hide the heat rising in her face. But Evan didn't miss the faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. You can't resist me, can you? He said playfully, stepping closer. I most certainly can, she retorted, spinning around to face him. Their proximity caught her off guard, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Evan's blue eyes locked onto hers, filled with amusement but also something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken. Prove it, he whispered, echoing her earlier challenge from weeks ago. Her defenses crumbled. Without thinking, she reached up and touched his arm, tracing the curve of his bicep with her fingertips. Evan sucked in a sharp breath, clearly not expecting her boldness. Encouraged by his reaction, Leora stepped closer, her voice barely audible. Maybe I don't want to resist anymore. Before either of them could say another word, alarms blared throughout the ship, startling them apart. A red warning light flashed above the control panel, signaling an incoming asteroid field. They exchanged a glance, silently agreeing to deal with the crisis first and sort out their feelings later. Dodging asteroids proved to be more challenging than anticipated. The field stretched endlessly before them, massive rocks tumbling chaotically through space like cosmic pinballs. Evan manned the controls while Leora monitored the sensors, calling out potential hazards. Sparks flew as smaller debris collided with the hull, forcing them to make split-second decisions to avoid catastrophic damage. This one's coming straight for us, Leora shouted, pointing to a massive asteroid looming ahead. Evan yanked the controls hard to the left, narrowly avoiding impact. The sudden maneuver sent both of them sprawling across the cockpit floor. Are you okay? Evan asked, scrambling to his feet and offering her a hand. Leora nodded, brushing herself off as she climbed back into her seat. Despite the chaos, there was an undeniable thrill coursing through her veins. Working alongside Evan felt natural, almost effortless. Together, they navigated the treacherous field with precision, their movements synchronized like dancers performing an intricate routine. Finally, after what felt like hours, they emerged on the other side, battered but alive. Leora slumped back in her chair, letting out a shaky laugh. That was insane. Evan grinned, leaning against the console. See? Humans aren't so bad at handling pressure. She rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. Don't let it go to your head. As the adrenaline faded, the tension between them returned. Leora couldn't shake the memory of their earlier encounter. The way Evan had teased her, the way she had responded. Her feelings were spiraling out of control, and she hated feeling vulnerable. Yet, every time she looked at him, her resolve weakened. Later that evening, as they shared a meal of rehydrated rations, Evan broached the subject carefully. About earlier, he began, his tone hesitant. There's nothing to discuss, Leora interrupted sharply, avoiding his gaze. It was a moment of weakness. Let's leave it at that. Evan frowned, setting down his fork. Why are you so afraid of admitting how you feel? I'm not afraid, she snapped, though her voice betrayed her. I have responsibilities. My people depend on me. I can't afford distractions. And what if I'm not a distraction? Evan countered softly. What if I'm exactly what you need? Leora stared at him, torn between anger and longing. You don't understand. I've spent my entire life protecting Zarathia from threats, real and perceived. Humans are supposed to be the enemy. How can I reconcile that with whatever this is between us? Evan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Maybe love isn't about reconciling differences. Maybe it's about embracing them. His words struck a chord deep within her, but fear still held her back. Before she could respond, the ship shuddered violently, throwing them both off balance. Another alarm sounded, louder and more urgent this time. What now? Evan groaned, rushing to the controls. Leora scanned the monitors, her blood running cold. We're being pulled into a gravitational anomaly. If we don't stabilize our trajectory, we'll be crushed. They worked furiously, their earlier conversation forgotten in the face of imminent danger. But as they fought to regain control of the ship, Leora couldn't help but wonder. Would fate give them another chance to explore the fragile bond growing between them, or would it tear them apart forever? As the ship sailed through the vastness of space, the gravitational anomaly behind them and the asteroid field reduced to a distant memory. The dynamic between Leora and Evan began to shift in subtle yet undeniable ways. The tension that had simmered beneath the surface for so long now bubbled over into something lighter, warmer, playful even. They flirted without realizing it at first, their words dancing around unspoken truths like twin stars orbiting each other. It started innocently enough. One evening, as they sat together reviewing star charts to plot their next course, Evan casually remarked, "You know, you're kind of beautiful when you're focused." Leora glanced up from the holographic map, her violet eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Kind of." He smirked, leaning back in his chair with an exaggerated shrug. "Well, I wouldn't want to inflate your ego too much. Aliens already think they're superior." Her lips twitched despite herself. "Humans are so arrogant," she shot back, though there was no venom in her tone. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand. "But if we're being honest, you're not entirely repulsive either." Evan raised an eyebrow, pretending to be offended. "Not entirely? Ouch, that hurts." She laughed, a genuine, melodic sound that made Evan's heart skip a beat. It was rare to hear her laugh like that, free and unrestrained, and he found himself wanting to hear it again. "I suppose I could give you points for bravery," she added teasingly. "And maybe, just maybe, for being moderately tolerable." "Moderately?" he echoed, feigning indignation. "Princess, you wound me." Their banter became a daily ritual, filling the quiet moments aboard the ship with laughter and stolen glances. But it wasn't just playful teasing anymore. Their conversations grew deeper, more personal. Evan told her about his childhood dreams of becoming an astronaut, how he'd spent countless nights staring at the stars through a battered old telescope his father had built. Leora shared stories of her own youth, growing up surrounded by Zarathia's glowing forests and learning the ancient traditions of her people. She spoke of the pressures of royalty, the weight of expectation, and the loneliness that came with always having to be strong. "You're stronger than you think," Evan said one night as they sat side by side on the observation deck, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. His voice was soft, sincere. "Stronger than anyone I've ever met." Leora turned to look at him, surprised by the earnestness in his expression. "You barely know me," she murmured. "I know enough," he replied simply. "And what I don't know, I want to learn." The honesty in his words caught her off guard. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. So instead of speaking, she reached out hesitantly and took his hand in hers. Evan's fingers intertwined with hers, warm and steady, and neither of them pulled away. Days turned into weeks, and their connection deepened with every passing moment. They began sharing small intimacies, brushing shoulders as they passed in the narrow corridors, lingering touches during repairs, whispered jokes only they understood. Leora found herself stealing glances at Evan when she thought he wasn't looking, admiring the way his brow furrowed in concentration or the faint dimple that appeared when he smiled. Evan, in turn, couldn't help but notice the way her opalescent skin seemed to shimmer brighter whenever she laughed, or the way her hair floated gently in zero gravity like a halo of silver threads. One day, while tinkering with the ship's communication system, Evan decided to test their newfound closeness. "So," he began casually, "if you weren't a princess, what would you be doing right now?" Leora paused, considering the question. "Probably exploring the galaxy, seeing new worlds, meeting new species, experiencing life beyond duty." She gave him a wry smile. "What about you? If you weren't stuck here with me, where would you be?" "Are you kidding?" he said immediately, meeting her gaze. "I can't imagine being anywhere else." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, breaking the spell, Evan grinned mischievously. "Besides, who else is going to save your royal but every time trouble shows up?" "Oh, please," she scoffed, swatting his arm playfully. "If anything, I'm the one saving you." Their laughter filled the small compartment, echoing off the metallic walls. Yet beneath the humor lay a truth neither of them could deny. They were beginning to rely on each other, not just physically, but emotionally. Evan had become her confidant, her partner, someone she trusted completely. And Leora, with all her strength and stubbornness, had shown Evan a side of herself few others had ever seen. Despite their growing bond, challenges still loomed ahead. Supplies were running low, and the ship's systems were beginning to show signs of wear after weeks of constant use. Tempers occasionally flared, especially when disagreements arose over navigation routes or ration allocations. But even in those moments of frustration, there was an underlying understanding between them, an unspoken promise to work through it together. One particularly tense argument erupted when Leora insisted on taking a detour to investigate a mysterious energy signal detected by the ship's scanners. Evan argued that it was too risky, given their dwindling resources, but Leora refused to back down. "We can't ignore this," she snapped, her voice sharp with determination. "What if it's important? What if it leads us to help? And what if it leads us straight into danger?" Evan countered, equally adamant. "We're barely holding this ship together as it is." They stared at each other, both unwilling to yield. Finally, Leora sighed, her anger melting away as quickly as it had flared. "You're right," she admitted reluctantly. "I'm sorry. I hate feeling powerless." Evan softened instantly, stepping closer to place a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure it out," he said firmly. "Together." That single word, together, seemed to carry more weight than anything else they'd said. It was a reminder that no matter how difficult things got, they weren't alone. They had each other. Late one night, as the ship drifted silently through the void, Leora found herself unable to sleep. She wandered to the observation deck, seeking solace in the infinite beauty of the cosmos. To her surprise, Evan was already there, sprawled on the floor with his arms folded behind his head, staring up at the stars. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, noticing her presence. She shook her head, joining him on the floor. For a while, they simply sat in companionable silence, watching the universe unfold before them. Then softly, Leora spoke. "Do you ever wonder what happens next? After all this?" "All this," Evan echoed, glancing at her. "This journey," she clarified. "Us." He considered the question for a long moment before answering. "I try not to think too far ahead. Right now, all that matters is getting you home safely. Everything else, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." His words were practical, grounded, but they carried a note of finality that made Leora's chest tighten. She wanted to ask him what he truly felt, whether he saw a future for them beyond this shared ordeal. But fear held her back, fear of rejection, of uncertainty. So instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder, letting the warmth of his presence comfort her. Evan didn't say anything, but he wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. In that moment, suspended between the stars, they allowed themselves to dream, to imagine a world where their differences didn't divide them, where love transcended boundaries. But reality lingered just beyond the horizon, waiting to challenge everything they believed possible. One evening, as the ship drifted through a particularly serene section of space, Leora found herself unable to ignore the growing ache in her heart any longer. She had spent countless nights wrestling with her feelings for Evan, torn between duty and desire. But now, with each passing day bringing them closer to Zarathia, and inevitably separation, she realized she couldn't let him go without taking a chance. Summoning every ounce of courage she possessed, Leora approached Evan while he was tinkering with the engine. "Evan," she began hesitantly, her voice trembling slightly, "there's something I need to ask you." He looked up from his work, wiping grease-stained hands on a rag. Sensing the seriousness in her tone, he set the tools aside and gave her his full attention. "What is it?" Leora took a deep breath, her shimmering eyes meeting his. I want us to bond." For a moment, Evan simply stared at her, stunned by the weight of her words. Bonding was no small matter. It wasn't just physical intimacy. It was a sacred connection, a merging of souls that went far beyond anything humans typically understood. To hear Leora say those words left him speechless. But then, instead of accepting her invitation, he shook his head firmly. "No." Her heart sank. "What?" she whispered, feeling a pang of rejection sharper than she'd expected. "Why not?" Evan stepped closer, his expression soft but resolute. "Because I don't believe in doing something so meaningful unless we're ready to commit completely. And for me, that means marriage." Marriage. The word hung in the air like a starburst, illuminating possibilities Leora had never dared to consider. Her mind raced with doubts and fears. A human? Marrying an alien princess? Her parents would never approve. The council would see it as a betrayal of Zarathian traditions. Yet, despite all the reasons why it shouldn't happen, the idea ignited a spark of hope within her, a longing for a future where love triumphed over prejudice. She faltered, unsure of what to say. You know my people won't accept this. My parents, they'll never agree. They will, Evan said confidently, reaching out to take her hands in his. Because science proves it's possible. Humans and Zarathians can bond biologically, emotionally, spiritually. We're compatible in ways most species aren't. That has to count for something. His conviction bolstered her wavering resolve. She looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt, but found only unwavering certainty. Slowly, she nodded. If we do this, if we marry, it won't be easy. There will be challenges, so many obstacles. I know, Evan replied softly, brushing a strand of silvery hair from her face. But I'm willing to face them all, as long as I'm facing them with you. Tears welled up in Leora's eyes, though they sparkled like stardust rather than sorrow. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, not as a princess burdened by expectations, but as a person worthy of love. Then let's do it, she whispered, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Let's get married. The ceremony was simple yet profound, held aboard the ship surrounded by the vastness of space. Using holographic projections, they created a makeshift altar adorned with symbols from both Earth and Zarathia. Evan wore a clean white shirt borrowed from one of the crew uniforms, while Leora adorned herself with glowing vines harvested from the crystalline forest of her homeworld. Together, they exchanged vows written in their own words, promising to stand by each other through every trial and triumph. I vow to honor your strength, your wisdom, and your heart, Evan said, his voice filled with emotion. To support you as your partner, your equal, and your greatest ally. And I vow to cherish your kindness, your bravery, and your humanity, Leora replied, her voice trembling with joy. To walk beside you, always, no matter where the stars may lead us. As they sealed their union with a kiss, the ship's lights dimmed momentarily, replaced by a cascade of shimmering starlight. It was as if the universe itself approved of their union, blessing them with its infinite beauty. Life aboard the ship changed after that. Their bond grew even deeper, transcending the boundaries of species and culture. They laughed more freely, shared secrets more openly, and leaned on each other during moments of uncertainty. When supplies ran low or systems malfunctioned, they tackled problems together with renewed determination, knowing they had someone who believed in them unconditionally. But their happiness was not without its challenges. As they drew closer to Zarathia, Leora grew increasingly anxious about how her people would react to her marriage. She imagined the disapproving stares, the harsh whispers, the political fallout. Yet Evan remained steadfast, reminding her that love was worth fighting for. We'll make them understand, he assured her whenever doubt crept in. They'll see how much we care about each other. Finally, the day came when they entered Zarathian airspace. The sight of her home planet below, the lavender skies, the glowing oceans, the crystalline forests, filled Leora with a mix of excitement and dread. Evan squeezed her hand reassuringly as they prepared to land. Ready? He asked. She nodded, taking a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. When they disembarked, they were greeted by a crowd of royal guards and council members, all staring in shock at the humans standing beside their princess. Whispers erupted immediately, some curious, others hostile. But before anyone could speak, Leora stepped forward, her voice ringing out with authority. This is Evan, she announced proudly. My husband. He saved my life, stood by me when no one else could, and showed me that love knows no boundaries. If you cannot accept him, then you cannot accept me. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, one of the elder council members stepped forward. After examining Evan closely, he nodded gravely. Scientifically, the compatibility is undeniable. Emotionally, it appears genuine. Perhaps this union is meant to be. With those words, the tension broke. The crowd began to murmur in approval, some even smiling warmly at the unlikely couple. Leora turned to Evan, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. It worked, she breathed. They accept us. Evan grinned, pulling her into a tight embrace. Of course they did. Who could resist us? In the years that followed, Leora and Evan became symbols of unity, bridging the gap between humans and Zorathians. They welcomed children into their family, blending traits from both worlds. Opalescent skin that shimmered under sunlight, eyes that sparkled with galaxies, and laughter that echoed across planets. Together, they forged a legacy of peace and understanding, proving that love could conquer even the greatest divides. Yet, as they gazed up at the stars from their palace balcony one night, holding hands like they had on the ship, they knew their journey was far from over. The universe still held mysteries waiting to be explored, adventures waiting to unfold, and whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as partners, as equals, and as soulmates bound by a love stronger than the cosmos itself.